The Navy-based gym buzzed with the sound of steel weights clanging, boots striking the mats, and men's laughter echoing through the high-ceilinged room. The SEALs had just finished their morning endurance drill, bodies slick with sweat, spirits high, their teasing loud and unrestrained. That was when the door opened and she walked in. Or rather, she moved in, slowly, carefully, supported by two metal crutches. The sound of their rubber ends clicking against the concrete was sharp enough to draw every eye. She was small compared to the men, a wisp of a woman in gray PT uniform pants and a loose navy sweatshirt. Her hair was tied back tight, the color of sand, and her eyes, calm, calculating, took in the entire room. The laughter started almost immediately, low at first, then rising. A few SEALs exchanged glances, smirking as one of them muttered under his breath, wondering if she was lost. Another asked loudly if the base's physical therapy center was down the hall, but she didn't answer. She moved toward the center of the gym, each step precise, deliberate. Her crutches weren't just supports. They were extensions of her body, moved with grace as if she'd trained with them as part of her combat kit. She stopped before the mat and waited. The commanding officer, a tall man named Harland, cleared his throat, trying to quiet the room, but the smirks didn't fade. When she looked at them, though, one by one their laughter weakened. There was something in her expression, not anger, not pity, but steel. Harland finally spoke. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Dana Reeves. She was a decorated operations analyst recently reassigned to the base for a training seminar. The word analyst made a few more of the men chuckle. To them, analysts were desk-bound, number-crunching types, not soldiers, not warriors. She handed Harland a folded paper, her orders. He nodded and gestured to the men to gather. She was here to instruct them on adaptive threat response strategies, simulations that required quick thinking under pressure. The men gathered reluctantly, still wearing the smugness of combat-proven arrogance. Dana set down her crutches beside her and lowered herself carefully to the mat. Her movements were slow, not from weakness but control. She positioned herself into a seated posture, breathing deeply, then began explaining her session. Her voice was clear, clipped, trained by years of command. She spoke of enemy unpredictability, of mental readiness surpassing physical dominance, of learning to fight when the ground beneath you disappears, literally or metaphorically. Some of the SEALs listened with curiosity. Others rolled their eyes. One, the loudest of the bunch, leaned against a punching bag and whispered that he doubted she could even stand in a firefight, let alone train them. Dana paused mid-sentence, glanced his way, then motioned for him to step forward. His name was Keller, a man built like an oak, proud and confident. She asked him to attack her. The room erupted in laughter again, and Keller shrugged as if indulging a child. He stepped forward, reaching for her shoulder in what was meant to be a harmless, controlled motion. In the blink of an eye, she moved. Her left hand grabbed his wrist, her body pivoted low, and using the crutch she'd kept beside her, she swept his legs from under him with shocking precision. The thud when he hit the mat silenced every sound in the room. She used her crutch not as a crutch but as a lever, locking his arm in place before he could react. When she released him, Keller scrambled to his feet, rubbing his elbow, his smirk gone. Dana simply said she didn't need legs to know how to stand her ground. The laughter died completely. The air changed. What filled the gym now wasn't mockery but attention, pure, undivided attention. Dana continued her lesson, using the crutch as a pointer now, describing patterns of unpredictability in close-quarters encounters. She spoke of balance, adaptability, and the mental discipline it took to survive when the body betrayed you. What none of them knew, not yet, was the story behind those crutches. Years earlier, Dana had been deployed with an elite reconnaissance unit overseas. Their mission was covert, deep infiltration, minimal support. A roadside explosion tore through their convoy. She woke up hours later pinned beneath debris, her right leg crushed beyond repair, her radio destroyed. She dragged herself across the dirt for nearly a mile to reach a secondary comms point. By the time help arrived, her leg was gone, and two of her teammates were alive only because she'd kept transmitting coordinates. That story wasn't in her file. She never used it as leverage or pity. The crutches weren't symbols of weakness. They were proof that survival was an art she'd mastered. As the training continued, the men began to listen. She challenged them in ways no drill instructor had, blindfolding them, removing their weapons, forcing them to rely on instinct rather than muscle. She made them compete in silence, using only hand signals. She reminded them that strength without control was chaos. By midday, even the skeptics were nodding. Keller, who had been the first to underestimate her, now stood beside her, running the simulations she'd designed. Sweat poured down his temples, his chest heaved, but when he caught her gaze, he gave a respectful nod. That's when the door opened again. A hush fell instantly as a man in full uniform entered. His stars glinted under the fluorescent lights, 3 of them. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale, commander of the entire Coastal Operations Division, stepped into the gym with the kind of presence that made even the loudest SEALs straighten up. Dana turned slightly, acknowledging him. Hale looked over the group, his face unreadable. He'd come to observe, to evaluate the training and its new instructor. Harland approached him nervously, explaining that Lieutenant Commander Reeves was conducting adaptive drills. Hale said nothing, just gestured for him to proceed. Dana resumed, leading the men through their final exercise. It involved simulated rescue under limited mobility conditions. Each SEAL was to complete the task with one arm tied and one leg immobilized, to simulate the chaos of injury in combat. At first, they struggled. Then slowly, they adapted. Their teamwork grew sharper, their movements more deliberate. They began to understand. When it ended, they stood before her, exhausted but thoughtful. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the sound of Hale's boots as he stepped forward. He looked around at the men, then down at Dana, who stood with her crutches. "Posture firm," he asked the group who among them had laughed when she walked in. No one answered. He repeated the question louder. A few eyes dropped to the floor. Then Hale told them a story, one they didn't expect. 10 years ago, during a reconnaissance mission in hostile territory, his team had been pinned down. Communications were cut, air support delayed. The only reason they survived, he said, was because a young officer, a data analyst back then, had broken every regulation to transmit their location from a destroyed convoy, bleeding out on foreign soil. That officer was Dana Reeves. The gym went completely silent. Every man stood frozen, realizing what she'd survived, what she'd done. Hale's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. He said no one in that room had the right to laugh at her or anyone who carried scars, visible or not. He turned to Dana and saluted her. The 3-star general saluted a woman on crutches. Every SEAL in that room followed suit, slowly, almost reverently. Dana didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She simply nodded, her eyes steady, her grip on the crutches tightening slightly. For the first time, the room was filled not with pity or awe, but genuine respect. Hale told them that leadership wasn't about power. It was about endurance. It was about who stood back up when the world tried to keep you down. He reminded them that every soldier, no matter their condition, carried a story worth knowing. After the general left, the men lingered. Keller approached her again, quieter now, and asked her if she'd ever teach hand-to-hand to the new recruits. She said she would, but only if they were willing to learn with open minds. He said they would. Days turned into weeks. Her sessions became the most requested on base. The same SEALs who had once mocked her now fought for the chance to train under her, to master what she called the art of recovery. She taught them to fall better, to think sharper, to fight smarter. One evening, long after drills had ended, she sat alone on the mat, staring at her crutches. They weren't just metal rods anymore, they were her legacy. The laughter she'd once faced was gone, replaced by the echo of something purer. Respect, understanding, admiration. When Harland came by to lock up, he asked her why she never told anyone about the mission, about the general owing her his life. She said you don't need to speak about honor when you live it every day, and so she did. Every morning after that, before dawn when the SEALs assembled for their endurance runs, There was always one figure ahead of them, moving slowly but steadily. The sound of her crutches tapping rhythmically against the pavement. That sound became part of the base itself, not a reminder of limitation, but of strength reborn. Because in the end, it wasn't her legs that made her stand tall. It was everything she refused to bow to, and every soldier who'd once laughed now stood taller too, carrying a new kind of discipline, one that began the moment a woman on crutches walked into their gym and taught them what real endurance looked like.